From the American Revolution to today's modern conflicts, Command Sergeant Major Joe Romans can trace his family's military lineage through the generations. He has passed the tradition of service on to his children, continuing a history of selfless service that dates back centuries. Romans spent his early years growing up in a family of 4 boys in Esleda, Texas. When Romans was 5 years old, his family moved to Kansas, where he stayed until he was old enough to voluntarily enlist and serve during the Vietnam War.
I felt like it was my war. It was my turn to go. And at that time, there were a lot of people trying to stay out of the military. And I thought that was dishonorable and despicable. So I was absolutely bound and determined to go do my bit. So it wasn't about drafting. It was about me serving my country like my family had done for generations.
Following the advice of his brother, he enlisted in the Navy as a hospital corpsman on October 1969.
By the time I had gotten through all of my training and then got assigned to a unit, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, that unit had just rotated back from Vietnam, so there was no going when they just came back.
Romans served as a corpsman for 4 years. He was the first non-Marine service member to attend and graduate the Marine Corps Non-Commissioned Officer School in 1970. After finishing his initial enlistment, he joined the civilian workforce using his military training in the medical field.
EMT was brand new back then, so I went through EMT training and I went to work for a city-county hospital as an ambulance technician. And then the 3rd paramedic program in the country, because that was brand new as well, I graduated from that and went into more advanced medicine.
The desire to serve was still strong in Romans, and he took the opportunity to start a new chapter with the Alaska National Guard. He re-enlisted into the military and served as a medical technician at Air Force radar sites in Alaska.
And most of these sites were remote. So that's right up my alley. I thought, that sounds like an adventure, so I became the only medical help available for 25 Air Force personnel and for 25 civilian personnel above the Arctic Circle.
During this time, Romans served 2 years in the Alaska Army National Guard's Eskimo Scout Battalion. However, changes in defense technology would soon have Romans returning to the lower 48.
We went from 13 radar sites the Air Force did in Alaska down to 3. Of course, when they shut down those 10 sites, they no longer needed the personnel to man those sites.
After a few years in California pursuing an auto racing career, Romans found himself back in Kansas with his family, where a fateful meeting with a Kansas Army National Guard recruiter would pull him back into military service. The closest armory to his home at the time was that of an armor battalion.
I'd never been on a tank in my life, but here's another adventure, and I thought I'd another chance to serve my country, so I said, where do I sign? And that's what brought me into the Kansas Guard.
Romans joined the Kansas National Guard in January 1987 as an armor crewman with Charlie Company, 1st of the 635th Armor. He would graduate as an honor grad of his MOS school and quickly move into a tank commander position. Even in this new position, his service during Vietnam still weighed heavily on him.
That was my generation's war, and I hadn't stepped up. So when Desert Storm came around, I was bound and determined to volunteer and go over and do my part because I felt like I owed my country and I owed it to myself. So I volunteered to go.
Romans mobilized as an augmentee to the 1st Cavalry Division during Operation Desert Storm and found himself without a true assignment. A chance meeting with an active duty corporal would change the entire course of Romans' career.
I'm sitting in a tent in the northern part of Saudi Arabia thinking, well, this is as far as I go, I'm not going to go any farther, when a young corporal walked in the tent, and I'm the only one there, and he says, my dad is dying and they're sending me home. I said, I'm so sorry. And I saw his tanker boots, and I said, are you off of a tank? He said, yeah. I said, I came from 3rd Battalion, 32nd Armor, 1st Cavalry Division. I said, does that mean your tank's only got a 3-man crew? He said, right. I said, can I get the information for your commander, your battalion commander, your sergeant major, first sergeant, and all that, and would you be okay with me trying to get up there and fill that slot where you're going? He said, absolutely. I'd rather my guys go into combat with a full tank crew. The most important thing I did in Iraq during the Gulf War was to round out that tank crew.
Upon his return from Iraq, Romans worked a summer assignment with the newly established Kansas National Guard counter-drug program, which would turn into a career opportunity he never expected.
After that first year, a new counter-drug coordinator came in, and he said, I guess he asked the old coordinator who he thought he should put in charge of that program as an NCO. So they called me and said, hey, do you want to be counter-drug full-time? I said, absolutely. So that's how I got to do that.
Roman spent the next 10 years working as the head of the counter-drug program, while simultaneously working his way through the ranks of the 635th to Command Sergeant Major. He was mobilized to go to Kosovo as part of Task Force Falcon in 2004. After returning from Kosovo in 2006, Roman served as the commandant of the 235th Regional Training Institute in Salina before volunteering to mobilize again in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2008. Nearing the end of his career in the Kansas Guard, Romans knew this may be his last opportunity to serve overseas with soldiers.
And I thought, you know something, I still have something I can contribute. It was about being part of the team, fighting the good fight, and keeping evil away from our shores, and I thought this might be my last chance to do that, and I can contribute. There's something I can do.
Romans worked with the 5th Special Forces Group at the beginning of his deployment, but just as in his time in Desert Storm, found himself struggling to find a place to serve with purpose. He was approached by a Navy lieutenant commander with SEAL Team 3 and began training the team on new mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles. He worked with the team on detainee operations and security patrols throughout Iraq and was eventually made the senior enlisted advisor of SEAL Team 3.
I can't tell you how humble that makes me even now. I mean, the level of trust to do that. So of course I worked around the clock to give it 110% on everything I did.
Romans returned from Iraq and served the rest of his time in the counter-drug program before retiring in 2009. He has spent the last 10 years working for USAA Military Affairs and the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, continuing his life of service to others.
The call to serve is strong in my family. It's been demonstrated by generations, and it's strong in me. I took an oath when I was 18 years old to protect and defend the Constitution, and that oath is binding for life, even unto death. So today, if my country needed me, I'd pick up a rifle and grab my ruck and go get on a plane.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Command Sergeant Major Joe Romans to the Kansas National Guard Hall of Fame.